Okay, how exciting. Welcome. This is the um, first episode of the Wild Dom Adventures podcast. So I'm starting this podcast, recording to you from Port McNeill, BC, Northern Vancouver Island. And I've set up a really good place with a sacred rock and some grass, grass that I braided. And I'm outdoors where I love to be. And yeah, so I want to introduce the Wild Dom Adventures podcast that I'll be the host. And this first episode. So this first episode is an introduction to Wild Dom Adventures, what that means, and let's dive in. So Wild Dom Adventures is my idea of a organization, business, community that I want to develop, exploring a few things. And it says in the title, Wild Dom and Adventures. So wild, what I mean by wildness is the wild archetype, the archetype of being attuned with your senses, with nature, with wildness. Wildness is, in men's work, we talk about the wild man archetype, which is the archetype of being able to, be attuned with your environment and to be attuned with what other people and to live well, to live really efficiently in that manner of being attuned. So I want to explore the wild side of things. And also, when I say wildness, I talk about wilderness, wanting to go outside and, really dive in to going into the wild. So that's really alive in the wild part. Some of that includes doing poetry. Some of it includes exploring aliveness through adventure and poetry. And that's kind of where my wildness comes into place. There's some dancing. So we're exploring wildness. Next, Dom. Dom's my name, Dominic Demers, born in Halifax, raised in Ottawa. And Dominic, the word means dedicated to the Lord, Dominicus. I'm pretty spiritual, so that's interesting. And Demers, je suis francophone. Mes ancêtres viennent de la France. My ancestors are from France, and their last name means from the sea. So I do adventures by the sea, and that's my name. And I like one of my friends, Danielle Jones. She actually suggested that I get these ideas out, that I podcast. And when I proposed the podcast, and I said it was Wild Dom Adventures. She said, "Oh, that's beautiful because wilderness is our kingdom. Wilderness is our kingdom. Wild Dom." So that was an interesting way to look at it. And adventures. So I'm an adventure guide. I guide hiking trips, kayaking trips, rewilding trips. Currently working for Kingfish Adventure Company, a sweet sea kayak company, and done a few guided hikes, some paid, some unpaid. Some fungi identification workshops. So I have a lot of different offerings and adventures that I'm excited to explore. I like to joke, but it's somewhat true that on my adventures, I make people's dreams come true. I like taking them to the moon and back. So like very poetic, very beautiful adventures. So that's kind of the vision of Wild Dom Adventures, of what it looks like and what I'm doing. So that gives you context when you look at my Instagram, when you look at Facebook, when you look at the YouTube channel that I'll start. That will give you like a very good idea of what I'm trying to do. And so this podcast is, and these videos are dedicated to like sharing information with you in wildness and how to rewild. Rewilding is a big theme. And in the rewilding theme, there'll be storytelling, there'll be food. It's talking about nutrition, wild foods. There'll be movement. So I love yoga. I love dancing. I love ecstatic dancing, yoga asanas. So we're exploring a lot of different movements. I'm looking at injury prevention too, working with injuries. I have some injuries that I'm working through, and you probably do too. So let's work on working with the body rather than not being attuned to our body. So in wildness. I'm super keen to explore biology in my trips too. I have a background in environmental science degree at University of Ottawa, and I've studied wild bees. I've studied blandings turtles, some species at risk, and now I'm really into studying whales. So there's a really good research facility called Orca Lab that I'm really interested in, and learning a lot about orcas and humpback whales. So a lot of deep knowledge in biology. And part of it too will be primitive skills. So like I've done a lot of primitive skill training. This is like a reversed wrap of grass, braiding, not sweet grass, but braiding grass. And so there'll be an emphasis on primitive skills too. Yeah, and storytelling is definitely a part of it. As you can see on my adventures and my personality, I'm a storyteller. So on my adventures, I'll talk about astrology, which is a really interesting topic that I will have a podcast on, all on astrology. I'm excited to do it with my friend Julia, who's an amazing astrologer. And I'll have just storytelling. And I would like to share like 3 with you. And then we'll continue on the podcast. So the first story is that of the Golden Boy. And it's the story of Iron John, which we explore a lot in men's work because it's sort of about becoming a man. Now, it's going to take a long time to unpack that story. So probably in another podcast, I'll do one on Iron John. But the gist of it is a young man needs to be initiated by his community, by his mothers, his fathers, his community. So I'm sort of going through this sort of initiation process. Then he descends into the shadows, into the darkness, and doing the kitchen work and the ashes work. And I've done quite a bit of that this winter. And I'm emerging like this phoenix. And I'm seeing gold everywhere. And the light, I'm playing with light, I'm capturing light. I'm like really seeing the stars, for example, stargazing. Yeah, it's so beautiful, like such poetry, and seeing gold. And that's the analogy of a golden boy who, once he's done the ash work of like diving into grief, depression, darkness, rising out, and then the world is very golden. And his hair, it said that his hair turns gold. This Shakespeare had a way of describing like the beam of light hit the hair and went to a woman, went to someone looking. So right now light is like reflecting out of me, which is really interesting. Really, really interesting. And so that's mythology that to help you understand what I'm going through and what these adventures are about, in a sense. These adventures, this is an epic story that I'll also unpack if you want more, of rescuing my father and the whale. And that's a very archetypal story. And I'll definitely go into it more, but right now I'm kayaking with whales. It's my passion. I know my dad had a lot of links to the sea and he's a passionate guide as well. Has always been a good guide. And I'm sort of picking up a bit further where my dad left off. Like he hiked the West Coast Trail. He was in the Navy. He loved adventure, repairing boats, and like that's beautiful. And I'm sort of continuing that, rescuing my father where my father left off, and my father left off in this whale apparently. So I'm really exploring archetypes with whales, and it's a fascinating magic that's going on. It's hard to explain, but I'll try my best through storytelling. And yeah, I guess the last story I want to talk about is something I thought about in terms of my personality and astrology, and the story that I am a wildfire. I'm like a wildfire. Wildfire. And wildfires are hot, they burn, but they also allow biodiversity to come in. So they're a disturbance that, if kept in check, wild forest fires or wildfires are actually healthy for an ecosystem because they allow regeneration of certain species that wouldn't regenerate unless they had that disturbance. So I'm feeling like a wildfire because I'm very hot. I got this like lots of energy, but I think it's healthy. And I think I'm trying to spread my wildfire and my passion, this passion for life, which I often call archetypally the fire. I'm like wanting to share this fire around through podcasting, through Wild Dumb Adventures. So yeah, this is my first YouTube video, official podcast. I had a few attempts before and it's just getting used to it. So if you like this video or this podcast, please like it, do all the things, share it, leave a review. I'll really go through all those to learn about what you want me to do or what would you like to hear. And I'll continue along this theme of rewilding and adventures. So thanks for listening.